Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Committee on Public Finance. We are here today to to uh, to to listen to your explanation on the deviation of headline inflation from the target for quarter 2 and quarter 3 of 2025, and as per part 14 of the Central Bank Act, to discuss issues regarding functions of the central bank. So those two things, Governor, we will take together as we have done in the last few quarters. Once again, welcome to the committee. We apologize for the delays because we had another matter that we had to discuss with your own people. Before we start, starting with Assistant Governor Chandranath, could you identify yourself for the record?
Thank you very much. I'm Chandranath Amarasekara, Deputy Governor of the Central Bank and member of the Monetary Policy Committee.
Deputy Governor.
Ravi Ratnayaka, an appointed member of Governing Council as well as Monetary Policy Board of Central Bank.
Nandalal Yudhising, Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
Nihal Fonseca, appointed member Governing Board and member Monetary Policy Board.
Dushni Verkon, appointed member Monetary Policy Board.
Vish Govindasamy, appointed member of the Governing Board and Monetary Policy Board.
Priyanka Dunusinghe, appointed member Monetary Policy Board.
Maitri Vikramasinghe, appointed member Governing Board and member of the Monetary Policy Board.
Manil Jayasinghe, appointed member of the Governing Board and the Monetary Policy Board.
Nelumani Dawalagala, Senior Deputy Governor, Central Bank.
Dilrukshini Vatuduru, Assistant Governor.
Pass the mic.
Dimuthu Samarathunga, Assistant Governor and Secretary to the Governing Board and the Monetary Policy Board.
KGP Sirikumara, Deputy Governor and member of the Monetary Policy Board.
Priyantha Tilakavira, Director Macroprudential Surveillance.
Sorry?
Tilakavira, Director Macroprudential Surveillance Department.
Chanuri Jayasinghe, Director Non-Bank Supervision. Lukshana Jayatilaka, Director of Bank Supervision. Inoka Vikramasinghe, Director Legal.
Vasant Aldis, Director Payments and Settlements.
Harsha Beratna, Senior Economist, Economic Research Department.
Amila Marakan, Senior Assistant Director, Bank Supervision Department.
Hemanta Eknayaka, Director Communications.
Lasanthi Sirimana, Chief Accountant.
Erandi Lienage, Additional Secretary and Secretary to the Governor.
Lasita Patberi, Additional Director, Economic Research Department.
Janaka Dirisinghe, Deputy Director, Economic Research Department.
Where is Dr. Jagajeevan?
She is on leave today and also she has been nominated to represent IMF after Aristan coming back end of this month. So she is on leave and will be leaving to Washington to take over that position.
Yeah.
As
Good.
alternate year.
Good. Then who is going to be taking over as DR?
Dr. Lasit Patberia is now acting and he will be taking over as a Director of Research.
Very good. Then we have got a leave of absence from Mr. Anushka Vijay Singh. Right. So where do we start? We have two things.
Chairman, we have a presentation. There will be, depending on finance stability, someone else will do that. And on the monetary side, Dr. Patberia will do the presentation.
Okay, so now it is 3:25, right? There's going to have to be a discussion around it as well.
Sure.
So how shall we?
Yeah, I think we ran out of time.
So depending on how much time, Honorable Member says if we run out of time, we'll have to meet again.
I guess we can do within, how many minutes you want to?
We have 28 slides, 25
Maybe half an hour, yeah.
25 minutes, 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Yeah, should be.
No, yeah, so now it's 3:25 now? So shall we try to finish the presentation by, say, 4 o'clock? and then we'll open the for
Yeah, so it will
question.
be not sufficient in any case to finish it. So let's take what is required and then break it up, other will be neither here nor there. It'll have to be a meaningful discourse.
Yeah, so what is the end time? Shall we agree on an end time?
We are, I mean, because we have been here for now more than 1.5 hours, so we are okay.
No, you were
because
supposed to come at 2:30.
Yeah, we came a little earlier in case.
So that is not
Yeah,
our
it's
fault.
already-
You came at 2:30.
Just to make sure that we are present on time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, with respect to the committee.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, we also didn't expect to take
Yeah.
that amount of time, but also you must understand this committee has discussions before we invite the officials in, because there are matters that the
Yeah,
committee
right.
must discuss, as you probably know. That is the practice. So I was in good faith that I apologize, I did not have, but I did anyway. But that is how committees work.
No,
So,
from
shall-
our
if you-
side, we have not scheduled anything for the afternoon,
Right,
so I think
okay.
we are probably okay.
Right.
If you want
So
to.
shall we say 5 o'clock? Let's say till at 5 o'clock, and we'll take a call at that time. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. Let me briefly go through the presentation today. And so this will, the presentation will mainly focus on central bank functions and mainly on the primary functions of the central bank. So the Central Bank of Sri Lanka Act enacted in 2023 has two main accountability clauses. So one is Section 82, and that requires central bank officials to come to the parliament and discuss functions of the central bank. And Section 26(5) is about if the central bank fails to meet the inflation target set out in the Monetary Policy Framework Agreement for 2 consecutive quarters, the central bank will have to submit a report to the Honorable Minister, report to the Parliament through Honorable Minister. And so that's the second clause that we have in the Act. So that's what the presentation is about. So if I start with the primary objective, so which is achieve and maintain domestic price stability. First I will see the inflation, so which is the primary mandate of the central bank. And headline inflation continued its upward trend towards a target of 5%. So if you see this chart, which is the black line, so that shows the how inflation has been moving from early 2021 till to date. And the expanded section is the red color. That's from January 2024 to January 2026, how inflation has been behaving. And as you can see, inflation has been at a peak of deflation around 4.2% in early January. And now from that month onward, from January onwards, we see inflation has been accelerating. And at the moment, in January 2026, inflation, year-on-year inflation rate was at 2.3%. And for this acceleration, mainly the main contribution was food category, increase in food prices, along with easing of deflationary pressures that I will discuss in detail in the coming slides. Easing of deflationary pressures from energy and transport-related prices. But this increase has been gradual because of the gradual and low co-inflation. So I will discuss that also in the coming slides. So that's why inflation has been gradual in recent months. And co-inflation, so basically co-inflation measures underlying inflationary pressures in the economy. So mainly that measures the aggregate demand conditions in the economy. So we have seen co-inflation has been increasing, as you can see in this chart to your left. And but one thing is co-inflation was never at negative levels like headline inflation. So co-inflation, the lowest we had was 0.7%, but now and in January it's 2.3%. There was a slight decrease in co-inflation in January, so that's coming from the base effect. And if you see the contribution to co-inflation, you can see from your this chart to your right, and it's mainly from non-food items. and also food items. So this we can see the increase in non-food item inflation in the recent months. So so we expect with the gradually recovering economic activities and also demand conditions, core inflation will move towards the target of headline inflation, that's 5%. And if you see the contribution of energy and transport inflation, I mentioned energy and transport was the main reason for this deflationary conditions. So you can see in this particular chart to your left, the energy and fuel inflation is given in these orange colored bars. So that was the peak was at in around in January 2025, but since then we see this the energy and transport inflation dissipating since in the recent months. So the main reason for this large decrease or deflation in energy and transport inflation is the two main items. So which is good. I mean the reduction in electricity tariff and also fuel prices. So you can see in this chart two charts to your right, and electricity tariff revisions since 2022 August shown here in this bar chart, and we see large increases 75%, 66%. That's in 2022 and 2023. That was the correction period of this cost reflective pricing. But since then we see the reduction or again correction in prices in 2024. If you see 3 times in 2024, there were reductions, more than 20% tariff reductions, and that caused mainly this reduction in or deflation conditions in energy and transport inflation, which contributed to drag headline inflation down. And this is the category-wise headline inflation chart. So this chart shows that we have main 12 categories in inflation measured by the Department of Census and Statistics. So these 12 categories are given in this chart. So the width of this the row or the row is the scale of that category in the CPI basket. So this color scale is, if it's red, it's a dark red, it's a very high inflation, and it's blue or light color, that's a very low inflation or negative inflation. So what we wanted to mention here is, so very high inflation in 2022, 2023, and if you see this housing, water, electricity, gas, that particular category right here, if you can see, so we saw there was negative inflation, but again in recent months, so we see that negative inflation becoming positive and moving towards the 5% our target. So if you see as a whole in this particular chart, the red inflation now it's becoming some parts it's quite low or blue color, but overall it's converging towards 5% target in each category. So the inflation target that is given by the Monetary Policy Framework Agreement is 5%, and that target is a quarterly for quarterly headline inflation, and the target breach is measured by a range of plus or minus 2 percentage points. So if there's the itself mentions if there's a target breach, there should be a report, and the report should set out the reason for the target breach and the remedial actions proposed or remedial actions taken by the central bank and estimated period of achieving this target. So in that sense, so we have so if you see from Q2 2024, so target has been breached from the downside or lower side. So if you see this particular chart, so Q2 2024, so this in this chart, the green line is the lower side of the breach target. that's 3%. From Q2 2024, there had been target breaches from the lower side, from 0.8 to now in recent, most recent quarter in Q4 2025, it's 2.1%. So we have submitted reports, 5 reports thus far due to this target breach from the lower side, and the 4 reports are in the public domain in the central bank website, and the final report, all 5 are in the public domain, that's in the central bank website.
Just don't mean to break your thought, but isn't it we are keeping every year, every quarter we are missing this, and every quarter you are saying we are doing something to fix it, but it's not getting done. I mean, do you think this is some systemic problem that you all are having, or is it something that is unexpected? What is going on? So hopefully you will be able to explain to us in the coming slides.
Yes, Chairman, I will try to explain. So if you see this particular chart, Chairman, so we see from Q1 2025, so this is the peak inflation, quarterly inflation 3.6%. From that point onwards, we have seen the inflation accelerating, minus 1.1, 0.8%, and 2.1%. So we expect this trend to continue. So as I mentioned, the mainly this is one is economic activity, improving economic activity, and improving demand conditions. And the second one that we expect is decelerating reducing deflationary conditions in energy and transport sector. And also what we see, one thing here, Chairman, so the inflation acceleration is a little slow than we expected. So that could be, one reason could be, so we are after a crisis, and there was a level shift in the price levels, and so that could have some impact on the price setting behavior of the firms because of the level shift in the price levels. So that could be one reason.
May I just disturb you there for a second? Now, when you came to our committee then, when you reported to us on 10 January 2025, when did you expect to get back into target? What was your expectation then? In January 2025, what did you tell this committee? When were you going to get back?
That was a year ago, Chairman, right?
Yeah, that was the first report, no?
Yeah.
First report was, according to your slide, this slide, it says January 20, no, that slide, the first one.
So first report was, 10th to Parliament, 10th January 2025.
Yeah, so what I want to know is generally, when did you expect to be back in the plus minus 2 range? When? That is what I want to know. When?
Yeah. One moment, Chairman, we'll have that number.
While you go ahead, somebody, your assistant can, what we want to know is this, Director, is you presented us 5 reports. In those 5 reports, we want to know when you had hoped to get back into business. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, not business, but to the target.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right, member. We expected inflation to return to 3% level within the year, in 2026, late 2026.
No, 2025.
2025, yeah, sorry.
Then in your second report? No, we are not. We just to show that, because that is an important point here. Because why you are coming here is to tell us what you are trying to do, what you are doing to get back. So you don't have to stop the presentation. You can continue. Your colleagues can look for those dates. Yes.
I will continue the presentation. So, so the main tool that central bank has is to control inflation is the interest rate. So we have the policy rate, and since 2023 June, central bank has been maintaining accommodative monetary policy, and in 2023 we reduced interest rates by 650 basis points, and 2024 125 basis points, and 2025 again 25 basis points, and overall since 2023 June we have reduced interest rates by 8 percentage points. So the main idea is to the objective of this the policy action is to reduce the overall interest rate structure in the economy and give a boost to the economy and improve demand conditions. So that will help us to achieve inflation target. So at the moment, so we estimate inflation. This is our usual inflation fan chart, and we expect inflation to reach the target in the second quarter of in the second half of 2026.
Now, so is that a different date from the last time?
No, last time also we expected the target to around second half of 2026.
Previously?
So, yeah, we will come back to that. So the main factors that we expect this inflation will come back to inflation target is so one is monetary policy easing, and so the interest rates are the overall interest rate structure is low, and also we expect this energy and transport inflation, also the dissipation of deflation in energy and transport sectors, and we expect some increase, and we expected some increase in the electricity prices in the first quarter as well, but so now we expect in April some increase in energy electricity prices, so so that's also factored in when we project our inflation target.
So can I ask with permission? So I think it's very clear it's a trend line that you predict, and since you have not changed the interest rate in 2026, basically it's expectation of the effect of the interest rate change that happened in 2025. There's a lag. But the events that you are forecasting is from the supply side. So how would we do this going forward? Because you historically showed the majority of the inflation change happened from the supply side, which is the fuel price increase, reduction, and now again we are planning events to occur from the supply side. So basically what we are doing now is we are keeping the interest rate at the lowest possible probably in 2026, expecting the demand side to adjust in future and expecting some supply side changes.
So this is how we're going to do it, because timing is also an issue. So you keep that question in mind, and as you progress, please address the member's question.
Since we are, Chairman, moving towards the end of the inflation slides, so to Minister's question, if I use this co-inflation chart, so usually the
this is the last one, right?
Yes. So
yeah.
No.
So this is a good time to ask questions on that, no? Right, because we are going into a separate section.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's open it for questions on the inflation matter. Please, yes, go ahead.
Yes, so this is the co-inflation. Usually the co-inflation is measured we remove energy and transport inflation related prices, and also volatile food prices. So if you see carefully this particular chart, so we have seen co-inflation moving towards 5%. And this reduction in January is coming from the base effect that due to last year's January phenomenon. So from this, what we can see is demand conditions improve in the economy. And Minister, so we have a transmission lag in the economy. When we do a monetary policy change or interest rate change, it usually takes 12 months to 18 months time to reach the economy and have inflation impact on inflation. So at the moment, what we consider is there will be this demand conditions moving, and I'll come to the next section, credit. So we see credit expansion in the economy, significant credit expansion in the economy. I will show you in the slides. So what we expect is these demand conditions will gradually move. And of course, supply side conditions we can't just ignore, because our inflation target is headline inflation target. It's not a co-inflation target. So we'll have to consider supply side conditions as well, because suddenly if there was a 20% reduction in electricity, we can't do anything from next month.
So how do central bank answer that or be accountable for a headline inflation which is majorly shifted by the supply side, which is now being factually proven across the years? Governor, can you explain?
Yeah, thank you. I think very valid question the Honorable Minister asked, both supply side and demand side. So what we see in response to our interest rate changes, we are seeing the demand side as responding as we expected. That's why credit growth has been growing, in fact, more than what we were hoping, and also growth has been very close to 5% for last 2 years, and it's continuing to grow around 5%. So we don't see a problem in, and also balance of payment, the currency depreciation and reserve build-up, imports growing, all are in line with the expected demand side condition that we can control interest rates. On the supply side, obviously, as you said rightly, headline inflation is a function of both the demand side as well as supply side. So supply side main key component is this energy price reduction or increase by the authorities or the government based on several other things, and some short-term supply side seasonal impact we can factor that in. So I think this is where for any central bank targeting inflation to the dot, especially in a country where the supply side has a major role or major contribution, there's always a variation. So even going forward, when we say today, inflation will be crossing 3% in third quarter or second half of this year, it's also subject to our assumption now. Based on the cost recovery pricing, we can reasonably, based on the information, we assume list prices will be adjusted upwards on the request of cost recovery pricing. If that has happened, obviously this will go to 3%. If that doesn't happen, still we will not be able to reach 3%. But from the monetary policy side, what we in our interest rate policy we set based on the looking at forward-looking demand conditions. That I think monetary policy is where we think where appropriate monetary policy stance is right there in the balance, both the external side, demand from the external side, demand on the exchange rate, and also credit conditions, and more credit is now flowing nicely to the economy. The economy is also growing. So if we did not see the economy is not responding to demand conditions, obviously we could have reduced further. We did not see that. Even next year, this year, we see demand conditions continuing to happening. We don't want to have too much demand coming in, then it will impact on the imports and exchange rate, all these things, to balance both sides. This is where the difficulty for us, when a country which has headline inflation is determined by several other factors, not only the demand conditions, we always have this variation. We can say what you say now based on what we see now. If those are realized, we will see inflation crossing 3% by the third quarter or second half of this year. But if that does not happen, obviously that could be both side variation. And also to the fact that recognizing this kind of variation in countries like ours is one of the reasons why in the IMF program, inflation band is not 2% plus or minus, 3% plus or minus. They have given us a much more variation due to the fact that our country is settling, especially after this coming out of very high inflation and high price levels. settling into a stable inflation, settling into a kind of a medium long-term target will take some time. In between, there can be variation. That's why they have even permitted us to have this target plus or minus 3% or 5%. We are not deviating from the IMF condition, but obviously based on the agreement we signed in 2023 with the government, we are now deviating from the such a low side. That's the part is that, one can argue this is a deviation, obviously, but whether it is desirable or not is a different question. Whether if we had achieved 5% now, price levels would have been 3% more than what we have now. So that's the other part. And also demand would have been much higher if the economy going to grow fast or credit was going to go faster. So these are the balancing factors when it comes to inflation targeting.
So would these learnings be used now after 3 years? Chairman said that we can relook at the
certainly, yes.
agreement.
This is
because
what
now the data is showing us there's two sides to it. There's a side that central bank can obviously control and expect.
Correct.
And one lever to pull.
Yeah.
And fiscal side also has a accountability.
Can pull other levers.
Yeah, and then the maintaining a particular inflation in the country is a collective role again.
Correct.
And it becomes the question of whether we are fully independent of driving this. So it's a collective responsibility.
No, this is a coordinated effort. That's why we have a understanding with the government on the inflation target. Where what is feasible, obviously, I don't think any central bank nowhere in the world 2% or 3% target. It will be up or plus or minus something. Nowhere else there has to be fixed inflation for a long period. It is varying. What is the variation? To what extent we can tolerate or country can tolerate the variation given the circumstances and the economic condition is a debate.
Yes, Chandrana.
Honourable Chair, if I may add to what Governor said then, the Honourable Minister, I think inflation, as explained, is a function of both demand and supply factors, and when private sector credit by the banking system is growing at 25% plus, we have released about 2 trillion rupees as private sector credit to the economy in 2025. So that's a substantial amount of credit. So like Governor said, the demand side is functioning very well. So it is those disruptions from the supply side that is probably keeping, of course, I mean, there are demand side issues because disposable incomes are low and so on. But when you look at the supply side, I think Dr. Patberia showed a chart at the beginning where electricity price revisions have been substantial in the past. So going forward, if there are quarterly price adjustments, then the disruption coming from those will be less. That would enable the central bank to ensure maintaining inflation at reasonable levels.
So one thing on the credit side, now say the credit is going to luxury goods which is not in the basket. Would it actually have an impact that we expect or not is a different story? No? So for example, now our inflation is monitored from a basket that we looked at few minutes ago. So the actual credit, if it's going for buying luxury cars and apartments and all those things, it will have very less impact on the inflation. Do we have a view of where this credit is going to? Because credit is growing. If the credit is coming for manufacturing, consumer goods, supply increase, yes, it will have a expected outcome.
Absolutely, Honourable.
Do you have a view on that?
I think the figures will be shown in the next few slides.
Before we go to the next section,
yes.
I have some questions on this current section. I mean, the law does not exclude yourselves from not meeting the target because you can give an excuse on supply side. Law doesn't say that, right? It says you have to keep a, plus minus of the target. But you have been telling us every quarter, and that is what I wanted to know first before I ask the question. What did you tell this committee about when you are going to meet the target in the last 5 occasions?
Yeah, Chairman, I have that information now. In the first report, we mentioned second half of 2025.
Second half of 2025?
Yeah.
Why? Your reason was supply side, no?
Yes, I think in January we mentioned that.
It's all supply side.
No,
Mostly they were expecting the demand adjustment, which was the basis point reduction at that point, which was 125 BP, to effect by the second quarter of 2025, was it?
And credit growth was also weak.
DG, I mean, my question is, I'm trying to figure out, whether this is a systemic thing. I mean, supply side, is it a transitory supply side shock, or is it a, supply side shock that is continuing? Because the question is relevant to what the minister also asked, is that we now have a mechanism to predict electricity tariffs. We have a mechanism to predict fuel tariffs, right? And you know what fuel futures are. You know what electricity prices are, not just for this quarter, but also, it is available. So how is it that, you all are not able to capture that, right? So think about that question that I'm asking now, but before you answer that, we like to know what your projections were in the last 5 reports. So you said the first one was middle 2025.
Yeah, Q3 actually, Q3 2025.
Right then?
And the next report, that's for Q4 2025. So that's basically both second half of 2025 we expected. And the next report, Q1 2026. And the last one and this, the one we discussed today is both we expect second half of 2026.
That is Q3?
Yeah, Q3. 3% target around
Q3?
Yeah.
So why such a, I mean, there hasn't been any significant shock since 2025 January. I can't recall of any significant supply side shock, except for DITWA. We'll worry about that later. So why wasn't the central bank able to predict? And why has it been that your projection has now been delayed 4 quarters, 5 quarters? 5 quarters.
If I may add, Honorable Chairman, this is not supply side shocks that has changed. It is the assumptions that we took, as you said, now if you take now today position, we expect electricity prices on cost recovery basis. That was expectation even from the last year. That cost recovery basis, electricity prices could have increased by a certain percent every time ECB is asking, but that has not happened. So when you factor in that thing, and then on that basis we make a projection, of petroleum price, obviously a variation is a global price determination. Local prices are monthly are very smooth, and that wouldn't have any impact on the headline inflation.
Yeah, could you go back to that slide where you show that?
When you look at the when we make projections, we have what they call near-term forecast as well as a medium-term.
Yeah, so Governor, one second.
Yeah.
The yellow bar, I mean, most of it, almost all of it is energy, or how much of it is energy? Energy and fuel, no, both, no?
Energy and transport.
No, it says energy and fuel, so electricity tariff plus petrol price, right?
Petrol prices. Yes.
So if it is 100, how much of it is electricity, how much of it is?
What is the weight of that? You can answer that question.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, you were saying, Governor, I interrupted.
This is what the point is, that this whenever, even that's why even when we make this statement today, so now CEB has asked, say, some 16%, no, what is 13% increase. So for us to come to a projection, we have to take into account that request.
So you have to predict the supply side,
we had to predict the forward-looking energy prices.
True.
No, the supply side is a different thing. Supply side is that when there's something happen, there's a less supply or large supply. Supply side is not directly. This is supply side factors that will determine the headline inflation based on the energy prices, future forward-looking energy prices. So if we can accurately, say 4 quarters back, if we had if you look at the assumption, we had forecasted the energy price variation based on the cost recovery pricing. That did not happen. As a result, inflation did not move the way that we predicted at that time. That was the major reason, not the only reason. That was one of the major reasons. That's why you see the yellow bars are the reason for the deviation. Even now, when we say this is based on a 13% increase in electric prices, if that doesn't happen, then we may not be able to hit that 5
So it's not in your control.
Yeah, this is obviously, I don't central bank has any say on that.
Yeah, but then you'll have to amend the law. Because,
That's
you know,
what I'm saying.
it says, you know, you have to be responsible for what you can be responsible for.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, if you look at the core inflation, yes, people don't understand what core inflation is. But as your job is certainly not to be predicting, you know, what's going to happen, whether the political authority is going to approve the PUCSL tariff reduction or increase or not.
Yeah.
Right? You are just going on the basis that it will be done. I buy that argument.
So then the agreement should be on the core inflation.
That is what I have been saying from the beginning. I have been arguing here that from the beginning, that from 2024, whenever this was brought, Governor, you recall, that this has to be within the control of the central bank. Either that has to be core, or then you, in the law you have to separation that what is within the control of the central bank. So the point is, you know, whether you can't actually predict, right? Did you find out what the percentage weight was? How much was the weight?
For electricity, it is 3.9, which is 39%. If you put it to 100, the fuel, it is 6. The weight is 6. That is 60%.
60%?
Yeah, 60 to 40.
So 40 electricity, 60 fuel?
Yeah.
But the fuel prices we can determine, no?
It didn't change much.
Didn't change much, no. And also,
Electricity price
fuel
is
price
bad.
adjustment is they have never stopped it. Every month it has happened. So why are you saying it was not
No, it
possible?
has happened. Whether, I think when you look at today, can anyone reasonably accurately predict what will happen next 12 months world prices? We are taking the World Economic Outlook or some projections. So,
I would argue, yes. I mean, in the sense, next 12 months, next 6 months, I mean, there are forward contracts, futures that are trading, no?
No, but actual prices vary because if you look at even recently, because of this Venezuela thing or some, this US is trying to attack somewhere else, there was a $10 increase all of a sudden.
The governor,
This
I will agree
variation-
with you if then that has been a one-off thing. But to me, this shows that there is something systemic in your forecast.
No, that is the difficulty in forecasting, especially the energy prices.
Yeah, because now that argument that you made earlier, which I also thought was the case, may not be necessarily that. Because if it is only 40% and the electricity tariff not been adjusted to the extent necessary, yes, I agree with you, is to an extent impacting on this. But I am a little bit surprised that it is not electricity tariff difference, but it is the petrol price difference that is driving this more.
No, Honorable Chair, I think there is a misunderstanding. So essentially, we are talking about the weight here. This 40% is the weight within that energy and transport.
No,
that
so we are
category.
looking at the yellow bar, no?
Yes,
DG?
yes.
Yeah.
So that yellow bar is that 100%.
Yes.
But this yellow bar is driven by the very large changes in electricity tariffs. So in August 2022, 75% increase.
No, that, no,
23
we are not looking
February,
at the last
66% increase.
We are looking at the last 4
and
quarters.
March 2024, 21.9% downward. And so 22%, 20%, like that.
No, we are
No,
talking about
we are
the
not
changes
going
have
back
been
to 22.
substantial.
No, we are not going back to 22.
No, 24 and 25 January, and that has the base effect, and that's what's
The
dissipating
base
now.
effect
Honorable
you can
Chair.
predict. No, your model can predict the base effect. Don't tell me your
Harsha,
No, that's-
can I ask you one question on the analysts who are doing this? Is this chart, the predictive chart, is it a model or a general forecast on the Excel?
If I may, Honorable
Headline
Chair,
inflation
we
projection
have a very
chart.
sophisticated model.
Huh?
We have a very
So
sophisticated
you
model.
input these variables and you get this green line, this one?
Yes. Yes.
You're
And
saying that you input
correct.
variables.
Yes.
So then the two variables is supply side.
It's more complicated than
Okay, okay. I'll reserve my question. So the variables has to be supply side variables, demand side variables. Now demand side is expectation of a lag effect of a basis point change in the interest rate adjustments we did, expecting how it can propagate into private credit and all those things. That is one side of input variables. The other side variables is what you just said, that you expect the price reflective energy change, fuel, and crops or whatever you can use, right? So I am actually asking, do you really input that kind of ingredients into this prediction, or are you getting extrapolation of the existing one?
No, I think why don't you explain the what are the components we are in the model?
I see.
It's a fiscal. There are several components in the model. Why don't?
Yeah. So part of the inputs are based on supply side development. So we first arrive at a sort of near-term forecast based on what has happened in recent periods and based on seasonality factors, etc.
Yeah.
So based on that, we get a forecast for near-term expectations about different components of inflation. So that is a key input for 6 months ahead period.
6 months ahead period.
2 quarters, yes.
That's the base trend line. And then you adjust on top of it. Right?
So that's the base trend line, yes. But then there is in the model there are some economic relationships built in. So based on that, the medium-term projection is forecasted.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So to adjust the
What
base
are
line.
the variables? Say you have energy component, then the fiscal component, the other component.
Yes. So that is this near-term forecast is one component. The other major inputs going into the projections are we have forecasts for global variables like what is going to happen to global oil prices and US interest rate. Then we also have some expectation about our trading partners' output level, demand conditions for basically external side. So those are given as inputs as a projection. And also we have a projection input for the fiscal side also. So we have inputs from IMF path and also from projections of budget announcements that are announced. We take those inputs also as an input and those are part of the inputs that go into this projection.
Right. So these inputs are assumptions. Nobody can really get it, right? So for the 5 projections you have done, you have inputted at each point 5 sets of variables. Now you can also learn out of it which assumption did fail and which assumption was close. Am I right? Because it's a mathematical model. The inputs are assumptions. Now the assumptions have changed. That's what the governor is saying. No? So then you can learn out of it and say our assumptions were off. And it has to be clearly indicative to say that our assumptions of last quarter, XYZ variables were off, therefore this. Because if we coined it to one particular fact of CB not adjusting prices, then it defies the purpose of having a model.
Let me add to this. This is precisely what I am saying also, because I mean, if it is a one-off thing, then it's okay. But to me, to all of us, the yellow line seems to be fairly. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be off every quarter.
These are the same things you asked the last 3-4 and the same answers come around. So it is because the same answers have been given, electricity tariff in Q4, the food prices they say, energy prices, so it's back again the same thing.
No, so that is why